Wait, you thought we were done with Stage 2 of the Asia Pacific League? Yeah, no. There's still one more piece of business to attend to before we move on to the Munich Major, and that is the Asia Pacific League Major Qualifier. In a new change to the established format of previous years, all three sub-regions will now face off in a double elimination bracket to book their spot at the Munich Major next month, to be held on site at PAX Melbourne this coming weekend. With 8 teams attending and only 4 slots available, this will almost guarantee that the best teams from APAC will head to Germany. And let me tell you, we have some real oddballs in this qualifier bracket thanks to some major upsets in Stage 2. So like with all my previous videos in the past, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at all the teams that qualified for the major qualifier, talk about their journey up to this point, and their odds of making it to Munich. But before we get there, you're probably wondering how this qualifier bracket is going to work. It is an 8-team double elimination bracket that features mostly best of 3 matches, with the exception of the upper bracket quarterfinals, which are essentially best of 1 seeding matches. In order to qualify for the Munich Major, you need to finish in the top 4 at minimum. Win 2 matches, and you're in. Lose 2 matches, however, and your run of the qualifier is done. But there is a bit more to this bracket than just qualifying for Munich, as there is an actual prize pool on the line as well, with the winning team taking home close to 30,000 Australian. The first day's worth of games will take place at Fortress Melbourne to determine who will actually be heading to Munich. The top 4 will then play out the rest of their games at PAX Melbourne for all the marble. I'll admit, I was initially hesitant about the APL having its own dedicated major qualifier bracket, even though I understood the reasons why we had to have it in the first place. That said, looking at the format and the amount of time and money being put into this, I'm slowly becoming a convert. There is a nice chunk of change on the line as well as booking a spot in the Munich Major, so there are monetary stakes on the line as well. I'm confident that the boys and girls with Blast, Rect, and PAX will put on a great show for us. But now, onto the breakdown proper. Starting with APAC North's 4 representatives at PAX Melbourne, they are the favourites to take the majority of slots going into Melbourne. On paper. However, the reality is the odds don't look all that favourable, as there are some notable omissions from this crop of delegates, as well as an unexpected dark horse that might prove more impactful than you think. The first team from APAC North to qualify their spot at the APL qualifier was CAG Osaka, who were in need of a serious bounce back after a disastrous Stage 1, through no fault of their own, I may add. Having to replace Black Ray so suddenly after his legal issues, you wouldn't fault CAG for falling off this stage, but credit to them, they stuck with it and came back just as strong. Deciding to bring their coach Didi onto the starting 5, they finished the group stage on top spot, though admittedly it was a little shaky with losses to both PSG Talon and Interforce 36. Starting the playoffs on a strong note with a 2-0 revenge match over Talon, CAG booked their spot at PAX Melbourne then and there. But then they would lose 2 of their last 3 games in the playoff bracket. The upper bracket final would be a 2-0 loss to the Brazilian import roster of Dplus after losing their map pick of Clubhouse, and they were just outclassed on bank. They would bounce back in a convincing fashion against Interforce 36 with a 7-0 demolition on Border and finding redemption on a 7-5 nail-biter on Club. But then we get to the grand final and they would only win 4 rounds out of 18. That said, they have had about 2 weeks to get everything nailed down in time for PAX, and I expect CAG Osaka to do well in the qualifier. However, they are on the back foot when it comes to qualifying for SI in Paris next year. Because they pulled out of the playoffs in Stage 1 following Black Ray's dismissal from the team, CAG Osaka finished in 6th overall, which meant that they didn't earn any SI points for that stage. What that essentially means is they need a deep run in Munich to increase their chances to earning a spot on points alone. And because the qualifying bracket for SI changed this season, no one really knows what the points threshold is going to be in terms of global standings. CAG Osaka needs to qualify for Munich to get their season back on track, or they can kiss SI goodbye. Dplus also booked their tickets to PAX at the same time as CAG Osaka, with a 2-0 win over BNK Fear X in the upper bracket semis. But given this is one of 2 import rosters and the APL this season, what can we really take away from this? Third place in groups behind both CAG and Fear X meant that they would have to play an extra game in the playoffs. But they started off strong with 2 quick 2-0 wins against Scars and Fear X in that order to confirm PAX and qualify at least in 3rd. After steamrolling CAG in the upper bracket final, they would then match up with a Japanese squad again in the grand final. And it was a case of second verse, same as the first. as they would claim the title in a clinical 2-0 win over CAG. This Brazilian roster was first in Stage 2 of APAC North. I hope you're seeing the irony right now. Not that I'm saying these results are unwarranted. They are very clearly capable of winning not only a domestic league, but also booking their spot at the APL Major Qualifier. But the problem is, they are very much outnumbered, and now they have a lot of pressure on their shoulders as the sole import roster at PAX Melbourne. They already cannot attend regional finals later in the year, so the Munich Major is their last best chance to qualify to Paris next year, either on points or by winning the whole damn thing, as unlikely as that is. It's on Dplus to prove the naysayers wrong. And now for one of two teams that no one in their right minds would have predicted they'd even make it to this point. And more importantly, they have the chance to play spoiler and disrupt everyone else on the roster. And that's Enter Force 36. Never heard of them before? Well, I don't blame you. They're almost permanently glued to the bottom half of the rankings within Japan, and had a similar performance in Stage 1 of APAC North, where they didn't even make the playoffs. Come Stage 2, they changed things around, following Sylvia joining Weibo Gaming and Yamada announcing their retirement from comp. So in comes Mugi, who was last seen in T1 back on Fnatic way back in 2023, and their coach Harper joins the starting 5. And not only do they make the playoffs for the second time in this org's history, at least in Tier 1, but they make it all the way to the lower bracket finals? What the fuck? To be fair, E36 actually had a pretty solid group stage, even if it started like crap, losing to Scars in OT, FearX, and PSG Talon in their first 3 games. But they would rally and win their remaining 4 matches and confirm the 5th seed going into playoffs, which is where they would really show their mettle. Losing to PSG Talon in the upper bracket quarterfinals was to be expected, even if they did take a map off the Koreans. But what happens next? Oh, they're going to remember this one for a long time. Storming out of the gate in map 1 against FearX, E36 would hold their nerve in overtime on a nail-biting chalet and eliminate the Stage 1 champions 2-0, confirming their spot at PAX Melbourne in the same breath. But then they must have thought knocking out one South Korean team out of playoffs wasn't enough. So they went in for the double kill, and got their revenge in their rematch against PSG Talon in the lower bracket semi-final. They would ultimately have their miracle run come to an end at the hands of CAG Osaka in the lower bracket final, but it didn't matter. E36 got the job done when it mattered, and they were just reaping the rewards at this point. Now, don't get me wrong, they should absolutely be proud of what they've managed to achieve this stage, and making it to the APL Major Qualifier is no joke. They are an esteemed company right now. However, I think everyone's expectations of E36 are the same. They're not going to get very far. They are, comparatively speaking, small fish in a slightly bigger pond than they are used to. This will be their first quote-unquote international LAN event, as well as their first proper crack at qualifying for a major. The fact that Enter Force 36 are even here is already a huge achievement, but don't expect them to pull any miracles out of their collective hats. And the final team for APAC North is PSG Talon, technically the sole South Korean team competing at PAX. However, they are a far cry from the team that beat BDS at SI earlier in the year. In groups for Stage 2, Talon was, to put it politely, inconsistent. They lost to teams they really shouldn't have in groups, and very nearly lost a couple more. But they were still good enough for 4th in the group stage. They started a little bit slow against E36 in the upper bracket quarterfinals, but completed the reverse sweep and won the series 2-1, booking their place in the semifinals against CAG Osaka, who then proceeded to curb stomp them 2-0. Okay, not the end of the world. They get one more chance in the lower bracket quarterfinal against Scars. Win this, you're in the major qualifier. Once again, they started off slow and lost the first map. But again, they were able to rally and completed the reverse sweep. They would ultimately lose against E36 in the next match 2-1, but it didn't matter at that point. I'm not sure how I feel about PSG Talon right now. While I wouldn't consider them struggling just yet, they were in a far better position this time last year under Fabian. Their points total at the moment has them missing out on SI by some margin. And because they already missed out on the regional finals later in the year, they have to qualify for Munich to boost their chances at going to Paris next year. But as it sits right now, I'm not optimistic about the Koreans' chances. Coming over to Asia next, we have 2 teams competing in this bracket. And like with APAC North, we have an unexpected challenger entering the ring. Weibo Gaming is the first team out of Asia who are coming into this playoff bracket as the first seed. having won the league not once, but twice. Coming off a strong performance at EWC with a top 8 finish, Weibo hit the ground running with second place in the group stage, losing to both Elevate and Fury. Not the result they were after, but still good enough to net them a bye in the playoff bracket. Facing off against Fury in their first match of the playoffs, they would narrowly lose the first map on Flare in overtime, and then complete the reverse sweep. They come up against the Brazilian roster of Elevate in the upper bracket final for a spot at PAX this weekend, and while it needed all 3 maps, Weibo got the job done. No one in their right mind should brush Weibo Gaming off right now, unless they were trolling hardcore. They're the only team attending this playoff bracket to have won both stages of their respective leagues, had the best result of all APL teams in Riyadh, by some distance, and they even dispatched the import roster of Elevate before the grand final even took place. You'd have to be properly nuts to bet against Weibo making it to Munich next month. As for the other team going to Melbourne, much to the surprise and elation of an entire region, it's not Elevate. Having lost to Weibo Gaming in the upper bracket final, they had to face off against the most unlikely of opponents in the lower bracket final, and would lose 2-0. The team that beat them? None other than Daystar. Having picked up the former Direwolves roster after they were released from the org earlier in the year, Daystar were looking to claim the title of best of the rest behind Weibo and Elevate. But Stage 2 didn't get off to the best of starts, with 4th place in groups. 5 points behind Fury in 3rd. And when they lost to Soul's Heart Esports in the upper bracket quarterfinals, things looked rather bleak. But it was here where Daystar decided, fuck this, and went nuclear. Their first victims were Fury, who they beat 2-0 despite the second map of Clubhouse going to overtime. About 8 hours later on the same day, they defeated Arrival 7 2-1. The highlight here was a near-flawless win of Nighthaven Labs on the deciding map. But it's their final win in the playoff bracket where I have to tip my metaphorical hat off to the Taiwanese, because no one saw this coming from a mile away. The lower bracket final saw Daystar match up against Elevate, and many people, myself included, had pegged the imports as the easy winners. They would beat Daystar with ease and move on to the grand final against Weibo. But when Daystar took Elevate's map pick, 7-2 no less, the alarm bell started ringing quite loudly. And when Constantly went to overtime, we really couldn't believe what was happening. Elevate were on the verge of being eliminated from playoffs, and missing out on the chance to qualify for Munich. So map 2 goes to overtime, and the rest is history.
Now it's time for them to land their block. Oh no. There's no way. And Joker then their shotgun to add salt into the wound.
No.
Psycho DC's reset is taken out and Stemp will have to activate. To test the mental fortitude of a player like Stemp, he's shot in the back. It has absolutely capitulated. Daystar may not be the kings of this Asian region, but they will gladly show that they have the pride of this region.
As for Daystar's chances at the major qualifier, I feel they're in the same position as Enterforce 36 for APAC North. It's an incredible achievement for them, but don't expect any miracles. None of these guys, to my knowledge, has any real international experience in front of a crowd or at a LAN event, and there are real stakes at play here. It wouldn't surprise me all that much if we saw them fold under pressure. And finally, we have Oceania, who are also sending 2 teams to Melbourne. But this pairing is actually kind of unique. They're the only region where both teams at PAX have also qualified for the regional finals later in the year, which could lead to some potentially interesting narratives down the line. Kicking off OCE's delegation to PAX is Enterprise. Following a dominant Stage 1 and a less than stellar EWC campaign, EP were looking to maintain their grip on the OCE crown, and with Gaming Gladiators going bye-bye to OCE Siege, the task ahead of them should have been a little easier. Right? Not quite. First place in groups sounds like a carbon copy of Stage 1's group stage for EP, until you look a little deeper. They were handed their first loss in a group stage by the Chiefs with a 7-2 loss at Clubhouse, which admittedly isn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things, as Chiefs had gone undefeated on club since the Montreal Major last year. And no one expects any team to be perfect for multiple stages in a row. Even W7M couldn't accomplish that feat during 23, and they were considered the greatest roster of the modern era. Enterprise would secure the first round bye for playoffs and have their match against a resurgent Man LFO who handed EP their first map loss in a domestic league playoff bracket and very nearly sent them down to the lower bracket in 2 maps. Enterprise would secure a first round bye for the playoffs and have their first match against a resurgent Mad LFO roster, who handed EP their first map loss in a domestic league playoff bracket and very nearly sent them down to the lower bracket in 2 maps. But EP bounced back with a thrilling 2-1 series win and booked their ticket to the upper bracket final against the Chiefs, which threatened to be mouth-wateringly good. Unfortunately, it wasn't. EP sent them down to the lower bracket in an easy-as-you-like 2-0, booking their spot at PAX at the same time. I'm actually kind of hard-pressed to find any sort of weakness for Enterprise. The IGL and Fisher guy is widely touted as a true mastermind in the server, and is actually more than capable of leading from the front. Bapid and Tuan are going nuts every other game. Relays is pretty damn consistent, and players' energy outside the server is exactly what EP needed. It is an almost perfect blend of talent and experience. If one player has a bad game, the rest are more than capable of picking up the slack. If I had to find one weakness, it might be that they take a little bit too long to get going, which can, and has, put them on the back foot more than once. I still think they're the favourites from OCE to qualify for Munich despite that, but only just. And that's because the Chiefs are just loaded with true firepower and experience at the top level, especially with the acquisition of the Sage brothers during the offseason thanks to GG pulling out of OCE. Following a poor showing in Stage 1, by their standards, Chiefs decided to reunite the newly free Brendo and Sajon with former teammates Oda and Jigsaw. As much as it was great for the boys to come together under a new banner, the group stage was not entirely successful, missing out on the top 2 by 1 point, thanks to a somewhat inconsistent performance, which you could chalk up to growing pains in a new team dynamic. Luckily, they were all able to have it come together for the playoffs by dispatching True Synergy Gaming and Ludovica in quick succession on the same day. However, the upper bracket final was not entirely smooth sailing. Despite pushing map 1 to overtime, they still lost Enterprise 2-0 and were sent down to the lower bracket final. They had one chance to qualify for the APL Major Qualifier. The Chiefs had to beat an Outlaws roster who was on the rise and looking to cause the upset of the season. Sadly for the Reapers, the Chiefs were just way too good and way too clinical, and to cap it off, they would have returned to the top of OCE in the very next match against Enterprise. Chiefs may be coming into PAX as the number 1 seed out of OS, but I have 1 or 2 reservations. While EP's team is very balanced and consistent, the Chiefs are loaded with experience and firepower, but I feel that they're slightly lacking when it comes to strategy. And what I mean by that is they're still slightly over-reliant on Jigsaw. We've seen a couple of times where it's essentially Jigsaw or bust. If he struggles, the rest of the team struggles to pick up the slack around him. However, I will say this. With Brendo and Sage on the roster, it's not as noticeable. They have been able to pick up some of the slack and give Jig a bit more freedom, and that makes them truly dangerous. If Jigsaw is allowed to be let off the leash, and his teammates are allowed to enable him to do what he does best, then good luck trying to contain him. And now for the fun part, predicting how this playoff bracket plays out. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be operating under the assumption that at least one team from each subdivision qualifies for Munich, leaving the last slot as a wild card for any subdivision to take. And for all I know, that may not even play out that way, and one subdivision misses out entirely. It could happen, and I suspect it may. From APAC North, as much as I hate to say this, I think it's going to be Dplus. You just can't go past the pure skill Brazilians seem to have at this game. And this roster looks just so indomitable in the Stage 2 playoff bracket. Dropping only 24 rounds in 4 matches, and not losing a single map, in the upper bracket no less. That's insane. And they did it against the best of APAC North. That just goes to show you what kind of form and momentum Dplus have right now. From Asia, this is a no-brainer. It should be Weibo Gaming. Winners of both Stage 1 and Stage 2. Top 8 at EWC. These guys are firing on all cylinders and nothing seems to be slowing them down. Elevate, Soul's Heart, Fury, Daystar. All have tried, none were successful. Weibo may not have gone flawless in their playoff bracket, but that just goes to show the resilience and mental fortitude these guys have. And I reckon that's going to prove invaluable in front of a roaring Aussie crowd. With Oceania, this is actually the toughest to break apart because they're just as good as each other, but for different reasons. And I think purely based on consistency, I have to go with Enterprise. Yes, they did lose the Chiefs in the grand final of O's, because Chiefs were the better team on the day. But I reckon EP are still good enough to have the discipline to bounce back from this loss. And don't forget, they very nearly took a map off of Furia at EWC, which in itself is no small feat. Mingoran and Fisher guard should easily whip these guys into shape in time for PAX this weekend. As for the wildcard slot, I think it comes down to two teams. Both are on the rebuild path after Stage 1 didn't go their way for varying reasons, and both are looking to get their season back on track. However, I think one team comes out ahead on sheer firepower, and that's the Chiefs. Now, don't yell at me saying, oh, you're just rooting for your Aussie boys. Well, yes I am, but it's not without merit. Picking up Brendo and Sage after GG's sudden collapse has done wonders for this roster, and the work they have done out of the server has paid off when it matters. Persevering after losing the upper bracket final and then winning the whole enchilada the very next day, that's not an easy thing to do. And don't forget, 3 out of these 5 were part of that Bliss roster that made top 8 at SI 2024. However, again, I am slightly worried because of their inconsistency. When they're on song, they are a terrifying unit to go up against. But if one player is having an off day, then the rest of the team suffers as a result. If they can get over that, then I don't think they'll have a problem. As for the other teams that won't qualify for Munich, in my opinion, Daystar and E36 are already punching above their weight as it is. As incredible and as awesome as it is to see both of these teams in an event like this, the reality is they're simply not ready for what's coming, in my opinion. E36 especially. Daystar may have a slim chance of cracking the top 4, but everything needs to go right for that to happen. And that very rarely happens in Siege. PSG Talon feel like a shell of their 2024 selves when they're under Fabian. Yes, they've had some good performances, but they've had just as many bad performances as well. Talon are in something of a form slump, and I'm not sure they can bounce back in time, especially since they've already missed out on the regional finals this year. CAG Osaka, I feel, is the joker of this playoff bracket. Their best is very good, no question about it. But the last 3 or 4 matches has me concerned for this roster's current form. Yes, they got wins over PSG Talon and Enterforce 36, and they were relatively quick affairs. But both of their losses against Dplus in the upper bracket and grand finals were just as quick, if not quicker. Most of these guys have international experience, but the last LAN they went to was Reload, back in May. Remember, they dropped out of Stage 1 playoffs that would have qualified them to EWC. I don't know whether or not I can trust CAG Osaka on LAN right now. Maybe they can pull a fast one on the rest of the bracket, but my gut is telling me no. Now, let's see how well my predictions stack up. That about does it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to hit that like button. That tells me I did a good job and it keeps me motivated to make these kinds of videos. Let me know down below in the comments who you think will qualify to the Munich Major next month. I actually have a Discord server up and running, so you can join if you want to talk more about CAG Esports or you just want to shoot the shit about anything. If you're a returning viewer and you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe to my channel so you can get notified when my next video comes out. My next video should be the Stage 2 recap of the OS League, and then it's Major Prep. Oh, this is going to be good. Also, just as a note, I'm streaming more regularly on Twitch these days, so if you want to swing around, come say hi or just chat. I'll leave a link in the description below. And if you're heading to PAX Melbourne this weekend, either to watch the qualifier or just as a general patron, enjoy yourselves and be safe out there. And until next time, operators, this is your resident Silverwolf, signing off.